Hello, scholars. This is Mr. Myers. We're going to do lesson 2.8, How the Law is Enforced. Make sure you take good structured notes over our objectives. You can see we have multiple ones. You might want to pause it and copy those down, and we'll begin. Okay, so the first concept we're going to talk about is the bureaucracy. And what the bureaucracy refers to is the running of government through bureaus or departments that are staffed with non-elected officials, people who weren't voted on by you and I. You can see that there's a huge number of people that are involved in the U.S. bureaucracy, and the federal government is one of the largest employers in the United States. There are certain principles or traits that we would associate with a bureaucracy. The first is a formal hierarchy, and what that means is there's people at the top and people at the bottom, and then people in between, right? There's a formalized structure for people to report up to the person who's heading that bureau. There's management by rules. There's specific rules that need to be followed within each bureau. Workers who are specialized in given tasks. This is merit-based employment. It used to be back in the day, getting a government job would be based on campaign contributions or, who your cousin is. But increasingly, especially after the Pendleton Act and the Gilded Age, folks who are working in the government have to actually know what they're doing. So it is merit-based, and it's supposed to be purposely impersonal. The passions of politics and the shifting winds in the political landscape are supposed to be absent from the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy is simply supposed to work. It's supposed to do what it's supposed to do. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the cabinet departments that are housed under the executive. There are 15 major agencies dealing with most aspects of enforcing federal law. That also includes the military. We call these departments. Each department is led by a secretary, so the Department of Defense is led by the Secretary of Defense. Each of those 15 cabinet departments has hundreds of agencies within it and thousands of employees underneath it. For example, the Department of the Interior would include the National Park Service and all of its employees. So the next two slides show those 15 cabinet departments. You want to pause and write all of these down. And while you don't need to be able to remember all 15, from scratch, you do need to know the basic job function of each of the 15 departments. You would need to be able to match a definition with the department. Okay, now that you've had a chance to copy down those 15 departments, let's talk a little bit about independent agencies that exist outside of that cabinet structure. So there are federal agencies whose leaders report directly to the U.S. president. They serve at the pleasure of the president. They could be removed for any reason. And the idea behind these agencies is they tend to be more responsive, less bureaucratic, quicker to act on issues. Examples of some of these independent agencies would be like the Environmental Protection Agency or the CIA. So we have another group of regulatory agencies that are also independent agencies, but even more specialized than the EPA and the CIA. These federal agencies also exist outside of the cabinet structure. The main difference between these and the ones I had mentioned on the last slide is that the leaders cannot be removed from these without really good reason. And if you look down below at some of our examples, like the Federal Reserve and the FCC, these types of regulatory agencies regulate. They enforce rules for society, and they may be involved in investigating corruption or wrongdoing. And we wouldn't want the president to be able to yank one of those officials who was, like, say, investigating possible, scandalous activity within the executive branch. So there's a higher bar to remove those officials because they do regulate the government. Another reason why these officials are not easily removed is because the types of issues that the Federal Reserve and the FCC deal with are extremely complicated and require a certain degree of permanence due to the specialization required to understand the issues that they're regulating. And lastly, we have government corporations. And I know this might sound a little bit like an odd concept, but we actually have companies that are owned by the government. And these companies largely have their own revenue stream. They're not completely independent, but largely independent of government oversight. Examples of government corporations would be Amtrak, which deals with transportation. And you probably all have heard of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which brings you Sesame Street and other programming on your Channel 9 PBS station. Okay, I hope you enjoyed learning about the wild and crazy world of bureaucracy. Make sure you bring any questions to class.